You're tuned into Inside Lowell. Inside Lowell podcast brought to you in part by Washington Savings Bank, serving the greater Lowell community for over 130 years. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. Reverie 73, Lowell's #1 cannabis shop. Elevate your cannabis experience at Reverie 73. Hafner's, heating and cooling homes and businesses for nearly a century. Hafner's, it kicks. And by Boston North Company, restaurant and retail solutions for your business. That's Boston North. And now, time for another Inside Lowell podcast. Inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I am your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you live from our Inside Lowell studios here in beautiful, historic downtown Lowell. It is September 11th today, 9/11, the day that we remember and commemorate. So hopefully everybody took some time during that day to reflect on what occurred on that day back in 2001 and to always remember it. It's also now less than 2 months away from the election here in the city of Lowell, and the campaign is beginning to heat up, sort of. One of the topics for our podcast here, our election 2023 preview, bringing in my guest host for this podcast, Insider Jack Mitchell, one of our election team members as well. Hey, Jack, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Lots to talk about today regarding the election, or is the talk that there maybe isn't that much? I got to be honest with you, it's really quiet. Compared to 2 years ago, not having a preliminary election. I don't know if that's it, and people are now starting to pick up speed post Labor Day. But I am stunned at how quiet it is, and how, maybe except for the at-large race, how uneventful all the races are for Lowell. Are you getting the same sense on your side?
I think it's kind of spotty. I mean, in the last election in 2021 was the first of the new election style, and so there was a lot of excitement. All right. I think there's some fatigue just from the activity level of the city council, so people are a little bit washed out from that. We talk about motion sickness. That's something we'll get into later, right? And then, but I think some have said that, like, when people are generally happy with the way the council is working, there tends to be less enthusiasm for changing anything. So the challenges that have put there, some sweat equity and representing their neighborhoods or the city in a different way, I'm sure those people are pretty much focused on trying to pull a win. But I think they're going to come few and far between.
So I turned a little bit into one of these OCPF junkies. I went in a couple of days ago and started looking just to kind of get a sense of where people are in terms of fundraising. I almost laughed when I saw that John Leahy had a whopping $78 in his campaign account. Now he does have a fundraiser in a couple of days, but he's running unopposed. He doesn't need a lot of money. Danny Rourke, the other guy running unopposed, he's got a decent supply of money in there, but he's doesn't need to use it this time. I know I was struck immediately by how much more money than everybody else the mayor has. Sokari Chow. Yes. And he's still got fundraisers coming on top of it.
There's speculation as to what his intentions are there.
Don't be shy. Speculate away.
No. I think the speculation is that he has ambitions beyond the city council, that he wants to try to pivot off of his role as mayor, there's nothing untoward about that, right? Like, that's politics. Some question whether or not he's miscalculating sort of the amount of support that he gets because of his role. All right. And that when he is no longer the mayor, that backing may deflate, but his bank account isn't going to deflate, right? So, and a lot of times voting can be influenced by the stories that you can tell with the money that you have. So whatever his plan is, and I've heard everything from state rep to state senate to a constitutional office like the governor's council or something like that, right? Because we know I apologize. I'm
I,
not trying to disrespect her, but she's
Eileen Duff.
Eileen Duff. As
Yeah.
far as I know,
She's
she's done it.
supposedly done, and people are
Yeah.
already jockeying for position
And if you
for
know
her
anything
seat.
about politics, you know this stuff starts like the principals telegraph that they're going to leave, right? They tell their people can't help but tell their friends. So whatever's happening, it happens long before the public finds out about it.
On the other end, Sokari's future is interesting because, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see him running for some other office in 2024 or maybe 2026. I think a lot of that, you know, could depend on, like, I mean, just say for example, let's say Sokari runs in 2024 and wins. Pick a mythical office, right? Does he give up that seat for a challenger, Justin Ford, who's gone at him twice now and gone at him hard, not pulled any punches? And, you know, it wasn't one of these nice, oh, we get along, either one of us would be a great representative. It's been some attacks there. Do you see him giving up that seat and just letting the next person come in? Do you see him staying on and, doing the Ed Kennedy, completing his term?
Doing the Ed Kennedy.
doing what Ed Kennedy did, completing his term. There have been others who've done it, so I guess I shouldn't call it doing the Ed Kennedy. I just went with the most recent.
For us, I mean, there might have been some time in ancient history that's been long forgotten about. Mm-hmm. But I think in the modern era, it's doing the Ed Kennedy, right? I mean, I think there's some differences there. I mean, one, Sakari was the person that was, I guess, to use a word, victim of Ed Kennedy's choices, right? So in a way, it would be pretty, I don't know if hypocritical would be the right word, but like, you know, if he was ever, you know, sort of crying in his beer with anybody about it back in the day, then for him to turn around and pull that same move, that'd be kind of crappy, right?
Correct, which is why I found it interesting. And I don't know if they've gotten to this agenda item yet, but it was Kim Scott filing it. And I can't remember if there was a co-sponsor of that motion, but like, hey, what's the succession plan? Because it used to be when you were at large, the next place finisher, 10th on the council, 7th on the school committee, steps in. When Andy Dakota had to step down, it went to the runner-up in that head-to-head matchup, Susie Chun. There's a lot of people out there who say to me, that's not how it's supposed to work. This is supposed to be like a state rep seat. If somebody steps down, you have a time period set, and either you just wait it out till the next election, or you have a special election. And I'm just I'll be curious when the manager's report comes back on that, or the election office's report comes back on that, what the recommendation is. Because there's a lot of people who are saying, no, the next place finisher that's not the intent of the people. That's just somebody who lost. You know, you don't know how that person would have fared against a third or fourth place person, or third or fourth candidate, I should say. So it's an interesting point.
You got another one of those?
Waters? Yeah, out in the freezer.
Oh,
so sorry about that.
All of a sudden, I'm giving you this face, but I'm trying to control going like both out face is all fucked up.
So I'll do a quick infomercial in a few minutes, and you can run out to the fridge and get it. But do you think that maybe this situation gets settled for a potential situation for somebody like Mayor Chow if he's thinking of another seat?
All right, just a couple things because we moved forward quickly, right? So you were asking about what potentially, what would Sakari choose to do, right? And I sit and talk with Sakari. He's a good guy, but I don't plan with Sakari. I'm not part of his, team of confidants, right? But in general, what we see is incumbents tend to try to set up some legacy prior to them moving. Mm-hmm. And since they know when they're going to go, that's something that they can do. Although it's not a lock to be able to pick your successor because, things can happen, right? The sort of incumbency, you're a state rep and you're a city councilor at the same time. when we got Kennedy'd, right? Like that was a bit of a shock to us. And I think part of it was just sort of there was a resentment towards Kennedy because of and so they wanted, there's probably some Sakari people that were trying to push him out so Sakari could be an incumbent going into to the next local election. There was probably people that just hate Ed Kennedy, and the high school thing created a lot of bad blood. There's some bad blood. I know people that have, surprisingly, there's a lot of grudges unrelated to Ed Kennedy, right? That they last for generations. And so, but what I've heard from talking to people that sort of stay down at Beacon Hill, so they see a lot more of the ecosystem of Beacon Hill, it's becoming more common where people are co-incumbenting, if that's a word.
So
copyright.
So keeping their municipal seat while also, okay, interesting.
I mean, in a way, it makes sort of sense because particularly in Lowell, we talk a lot about bringing home the bacon. So like if you can manage your schedule, then you can sure. be on the Hill and represent, and then this is a seamlessness, right? Because if you can take the concerns of your local concerns and bring them right to Beacon Hill.
Sure. And Ed Kennedy did it for a year, and I don't think the council was robbed of anything significant when he had both the state Senate seat and
they're both part-time jobs. So like if you own a restaurant and you're trying to hustle to make do there and manage that's a full-time job, right? That's why a lot of people that are in the like in the state, that real estate is a big thing, law offices are a big thing, because these are things that people, you're not working down at the Joanne Fabrics where you punch a clock in and you punch a clock out, right? They have some flexibility. So you could do both part-time jobs at the same time.
All right. You are watching Inside Lowell. That's your cue, Jack, to go grab your bottled water. I forget sometimes I'm on camera. Want to thank our sponsors for helping to make this podcast, all of our podcasts, possible. Our friends at Washington Savings Bank, serving the greater Lowell community for over 130 years. Lowell and Dracut residents, make the switch now, and you can get $300 simply by opening a qualified new account with Washington Savings Bank. Learn more online at washingtonsavings.com. Thank you as well to Reverie 73, voted Lowell's #1 cannabis shop by Boston.com. Visit their beautiful location at 1148 Bridge Street in Lowell, or shop their full product line online at Reverie73.com. Elevate your cannabis experience today at Reverie 73. Thank you as well to Hafner's Heating and Cooling Homes and Businesses for nearly a century. Fill up your vehicle, keep it clean at one of their many service stations and car washes throughout the Lowell area and the Merrimack Valley. Hafner's, it kicks. And last but certainly not least, thanks to our friends at Boston North Company, point of sale systems, credit card processing, ATM sales, service, phone, and answering systems. Learn more online at bostonnorthcompany.com. And thank you to all of our sponsors here at Inside Lowell as well for making not just our podcast, but all of Inside Lowell possible. We return. Look at that. Had I not, given you the signal on camera there, we could have pulled that off seamlessly and people wouldn't have known that you were ever gone from that seat.
We're transparent around here. We're not trying to pull any tricks on the audience.
We're not. Okay. Last point on Sokari Chow. Anything to infer from the fact his wife left Ratty Mom's office?
No.
Up there on Beacon Hill? Was that any indication about Ratty's future? Is it any indication about Sokari potentially, going for that seat? That's one of the rumored landing spots. That would be his state representative district.
Right. The decision to pick a prominent person from the political bubble is never unnoticed, right? But I've never heard anything. I mean, there are some, there are anti-Sakari people, right? But like I've never really heard anything terrible, or some people can be pissy, right? But like Samong is a super nice person, and as far as I know, she's always done a good job at constituent services, right? I have not heard otherwise. Some people may grit their teeth when they're talking about her just because of allegiances or whatever, and I'm sure there's some people that would have preferred she didn't get picked. But a lot of that Cambodian bleed over stuff between the national politics stuff, anybody that was really grinding hard, they're forgetting that Smong is not Cambodian. She's from Thailand.
Oh, that's right. That's
aunt,
right.
Right. As far as I don't know the story. I'm sure they've told it, right? Because it's a inspiring backstory. But maybe they met in a camp or something like that, right? Like, I don't know exactly what caused their union. He's definitely from near Battambang, right? And then a lot of the folks end up in Thailand, so maybe that's the way it worked. Or maybe they met here. I don't know.
Okay.
But to connect her to sort of to get into the rolling around with that Cambodian Hun Sen, Hun Manet stuff, it's a little off because of the fact that she is Thai.
Okay. To the other end of the spectrum was not a lot of money raised. Now, I think the lowest amount was John Leahy, which we mentioned, but he doesn't have anything to worry about. But I was looking at some of the challengers, and they're barely above $1,000, $2,000. Normally, you'd say they're toast. But this is the first kind of election/re-election under the new system. And the whole point of it was to not have to be able to raise big money. You can, if you're running for district, you campaign in your little compartment, and there's time to do door to door, and you don't have to worry about, advertising on media or getting 8 mailers out. Maybe 1 mailer will suffice. Are we to infer anything from the lack of money raised by a lot of the challengers? I was looking at Amanda Gregory, Marty Hogan. Most of them, I believe, are well under $500. The only one that's above that, I think, is Susie Chun, which is a race I want to talk about in a minute there. But can we infer anything about the strength of these challenges, how close the races are going to be, based on how much money has been raised to this point?
The strength of a challenger or an incumbent is based on who they are as a person, right? Now, that may sound like a kind of a cop-out, but where a candidate or prospect, whether it's an incumbent seeking re-election or a challenger, right? If they have the ability to sincerely pitch themselves and ideas for the betterment of their neighborhood or their city, all right? That's a person, that's a force to be reckoned with. I'll say there's sort of 2 things. One related, this is more of a district, which is why I was such a huge advocate for neighborhood representation, is the turf. To use a technical, operative term, right? You cut a turf. The turf is small enough for any challenger to be able to walk and knock and talk to most of the people. All right. And even if you don't talk to every door, if you hit 2 of 5 doors in a little area, those neighbors talk to each other somehow, right? Or if you're walking down the street and you just passed a house, but then the person that you just knocked the door and dropped lid at, they pull into their driveway. If you're smart enough to wear something that catches their attention, they know you're out. And if you're around, they'll see you 2 or 3 times. I mean, you could probably ask the city manager how many times he ran into Corey Robinson while the manager was out walking the dog, right? If you're doing the work, people notice. The other part of it, that's an advantage to challenges. The advantage of incumbency, particularly among high propensity voters, is every Tuesday night, or maybe every other in the summer, which is a whole other thing, right? They see you. They are interacting with you, or you're affecting them through the news and the media. There's an awareness, name recognition. So there's a benefit to incumbency, but for challengers, there's a benefit that the turf is small enough that you have a reasonable chance of, if you can present yourself and not off-put people, you can pitch it. You can get that vote.
So this is where I want to draw on your expertise, because those who don't know you, you're kind of one of the grunts. You in campaigns, you crunch numbers, you go through lists, you try to.
I don't like to talk to voters.
Right. You don't like to talk to voters. And I almost get the sense that some candidates don't like to do that either. Not even though they're doing it. But what I'm interested in, I always hear a candidate ask, how you doing? You out there working or whatever? Yeah, I knocked X amount of doors.
Right.
But how many people did you talk to? Or I'll have some candidates even tell me, oh, I hung X amount of pieces of literature. What's the difference between hanging a door knocker or sending me a mailer and actually, because you can get everybody that way. You can say, oh, everybody in that neighborhood, everybody in that district has my campaign literature. What if not everybody gets that literature, but you've spent more of your time and resources speaking directly with those people? Which one's more effective?
Walk in the neighborhood is more effective because people respect sweat equity. They feel they think of themselves as workers, particularly in Lowell. So they like to see somebody work to win the seat. They like the humility of that, and it's an indication that you will work for them. Literature, like droplet versus mail, one is just cheaper because you don't have to pay for the stamp, right? But I think it also, anybody could mail a card. I mean, it might cost $4,000 to mail it, but the voters don't care about that. They're not concerned about the cost of it. What are you doing the work? And so I think if you had one or the other, I would go around and knock doors.
What about surrogates? Are surrogates effective? I know in the last race, I know there were a lot of organizations going out and helping certain candidates. I don't think many of them fared very well, to be honest. But how important is it for the candidate themselves to be the one knocking on your door and speaking to you once they get a response at that door?
I'd say surrogates can be helpful, especially somebody that is a prominent person that has a lot of gravitas, particularly in a neighborhood. And I've heard plenty of stories about at-large candidates in the old system that would try to find an individual that was strong in their community, right? If I'm running at large and I go and I ask Paul Belay to walk me around Rosemont Terrace, that's going to be helpful. Now, does that mean everybody's like, oh, if Paul's with them, I'm with them? Probably not, but it's an influence. My father in North Reading was known as the mayor of Martin's Pond, and there's a tree in the front yard, which we no longer own that property, but he would post certain signs up there, and it was kind of a message to the rest of the neighborhood because it was kind of landlocked. You had to go past my father's house. That if Franny said that these people were good for us, then we're going to take Franny's word for it. With high information voters, they're going to be more discerning. They'll start to calculate, oh, so and so's supporting this because they got their stupid nephew a job. Like they get into all the calculations of it. So surrogates can be helpful, but nothing is better than a candidate face to face. It can also be the worst, but a voter in a district has a reasonable expectation for a candidate to show up at their door, hat in hand, asking for their vote. No one really has a reasonable expectation to see Elizabeth Warren at their door. She's running across the entire state. But if you're running in a neighborhood district, God help you, I think, if you don't do the work.
The race that everyone's focusing on, well, there's two races. One is the at-large race, which we're going to get to in a second, but the District 5, South Lowell, Lower Belvedere, Back Central, I believe there's some of that in there, or at least kind of that area, the Gorham Street. Kim Scott, the incumbent, Susie Chun, the challenger, albeit incumbent school committee person, both have roughly the same amount of money. And it's interesting to me that is predicted by most of us who kind of follow this, yours truly included. That's going to be the closest race of the bunch on the council.
Likely.
To me, the money kind of indicates that. Susie's got a lot more money than any of the other challengers in the district races. Some of that could be again, the school committee name recognition. But does the money tell a story there about how close that race is going to be?
It does. It does. If Kim has told her story, she's also told her story as a school committee woman, right? Mm-hmm. She was elected. She came in second in the first race that she ran in. So she has the name recognition, and I think she has a proven record of delivery of services, right? She's always known as being well informed. You're not pulling the wool over Kim's eyes. And if you paid attention to the ADU conversation towards the end, when she was, then all of a sudden she kind of was like, oh, I just have a few questions. And then she's like, wham, 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 right? And because that's how kind of Kim rolls. She's not going to be dramatic. She's going to be pointed and specific. And I think the voters are going to know that and be familiar with that. Susie has had time on the school committee, but I don't know, because I don't really follow it that closely. I don't know how she stood out. That's going to be younger parents that are in their 40s, 30s, 40s and stuff. And the voting is sort of stilted towards people that are at least over 40 in terms of turnout. And I think there's already a sort of narrative because of Susie's choice to stand on the steps and throw a gauntlet down about, Vezina Noon's bid to be the mayor last election cycle. And so if she opts to use the money to retell that story, I'm the fire-breathing Cambodian pride kind of pro-democracy candidate, or if she chooses to tell a different story about herself, one that's more geared towards solving quality of life issues for South Lowell.
That almost seemed like a hint of criticism there.
Well, all right. Look, I'm not going to bullshit anybody. I've known Kim Scott since, I don't know what, 2010 at least. Move Lowell forward, right? She's probably cringing, but we were running around we're chasing the good old boys, and right, like we had a sort of a vision and professional city government, right? Now her time in elected office has probably tempered some of her ideals with the reality of governance, right? As they have with mine. But I'm her friend. I've been to her house. I think I met Susie once. So if there's a bias, okay, that I'm going to tell you there's a bias. But
I'll back you up a little bit on that. And that's, again, I don't, this isn't really a criticism of Susie, but I've heard she's got a powerful story and she's a passionate advocate. And I know she's passionate about democracy in Cambodia. We all know that. I know she's passionate about Vezina Noon should have been the mayor and should be the mayor.
He should have.
Going forward.
Sorry, Sakari, I like you.
I was on your side on that. Yeah. If I was sitting on that council, I would have voted for Vezina as well. But that said, I'm waiting to hear, as you said, what's her thoughts about South Lowell? What are her thoughts about Lowell? What gives her that same passion on that day she kind of grabbed the bullhorn at City Hall to, fight for Vezina to be mayor? Where's that passion for South Lowell? Where was that passion on the school committee? You said you're trying to think about what she did. I've been racking my brains trying to think what was her signature motion as a school committee member.
When when that whole thing about the complaints and the investigation, right? I mean, who stood out there? Right? Jackie. Right?
Maybe Jackie and Connie.
That's right. And of course, those are tenured, so to speak, right? And so they know the position, but they took risks. And, look, you're always building and burning bridges at the same time in politics. It's just the way it is. So I don't remember. I remember her being sort of saying something, right? I also remember Stacey Thompson sort of saying something. but I don't remember like what it was.
Well, so Stacy was very critical of the superintendent.
Yeah.
I think I know where she was on it. She was very critical of Joel Boyd. I don't think she was overly pleased with the Liam Skinner selection. So we know where she is. Susie, again, and it could be, admittedly, I don't pay as much attention to the school committee as the council. Most people in Lowell don't. But that said, as you said, we know where Jackie Doherty stood. We know where Connie Martin stood. I know where Dominic Lay stood on Joel Boyd and other school committee issues. I still don't know where Susie stood. And I think this is where I think she needs to get out and start. This should be a very important part of her campaign going forward. I don't think she's going to be able to beat Kim Scott simply on Vesna should be mayor. I don't think and I don't think, Hun Sen or Han Manette, are going to, hatred of them is going to drag her across the finish line. Because at the end of the day, as somebody whose family owns a business in Lowell, I want to know what's her vision for Lowell. I'm not a voter in South Lowell, but I don't see that the South Lowell voters are any different. I think they want to know her vision for South Lowell. Maybe she's espousing that as she's going door to door. I could be wrong. If anyone's seen her on the campaign trail, hit me up. Let me know what are the issues that she's focusing on. Up to this point, I haven't been able to get her to talk about those issues.
I think you're right. All right. Again, for transparency, I'm friends with Kim Scott. I've known her a long time. All right. But when Kim Scott knocks a door, you're going to get the same exact Kim Scott. The consistency is going to be there. All right. The work ethic is going to be there. She will not flinch. She will not waver. She will not stutter. Susie, in her bones, are Cambodian national politics. On the stump, on the spot, she can come out with something. All right. You put her on a porch with somebody talking about the smell at Baker's Commodities. I don't know what she says, but you know who does? The doors that she's knocked on. And if she's got surrogates out there knocking doors for her, then they better be 10 times better because she's got a harder pitch. If she can pitch it and hold her own, I've heard her on the radio, not that great. Not on local stuff. If she's going to have to do way better. And people that know her, people that I'm friends with, they could be pissed all they want. I'm doing her a favor right now.
I think I am too. I think she should get out there and get her message out.
Kim Scott's probably gritting her teeth saying, "Shut the fuck up, Jack." Although she's a lady, she would never say such.
Yeah, she'd put it in much nicer
Yes.
terms. Let's shift to at large. The money thing that stood out to me, Eric Gitchier of the Challengers, by far the most money. Virak Oy, the least known of the Challengers, had the least amount of money, I believe, or close. He and Bobby Tubielli were kind of down at the bottom. Corey Belanger was somewhere in the middle. Corey's made some big expenditures, but I know he's got fundraisers coming up. The Tubielli thing was interesting. He raised a lot of money in 2021. First campaign, you said he was at how much you believe he raised in that first run in?
I thought it was 40,000.
He had big money.
Yeah, if you can see it on the OCPF. Anybody can see this stuff, right? You can isolate how much somebody raised in any particular year, or you can see what they've raised overall. He had, if he had $1, he had 40,000. All right, and he hasn't. Yeah, I don't think he's raised 4,000.
Yeah, I think a couple of thousand, but he did get in late.
He had some money in the bank, I think, and that got him some expenditures, right? But his fundraising has been nowhere near.
He also has name recognition. He doesn't need to raise 40,000 to get as many votes as he got last time, because now he has the name recognition from last time. The story I'm trying to see is, does the fact that he hasn't raised nearly as much and probably won't, is that a function of just getting in late, not trying as hard, or have a lot of the people who were with him the first time not with him this time? That's the part that I'm curious about.
I mean, I think that's a pretty astute observation based on my own sort of personal evolutions with Bobby, but I've heard that story again. I mean,
to be clear, you're tight with people who supported his campaign the first time around. Are you sensing a difference? That's why I brought it up.
I mean, there's some people that are pretty committed to the election of Bobby Tuvielli. There's no doubt about that. Then there's going to be people that it didn't pan out for them. I think you've heard something similar, and maybe we're just feeding each other about him disappearing after the election, or the way he sort of conducted his rhetoric after the election. It seemed a little bitter and, sore sports.
I think he was hurt by the defeat. Hurt. It happens.
Yeah,
I won't hold that part against him.
It's got to be a kick in the nuts, right? To lose,
of course.
I don't know anything about that. Because I've never put myself out there
personally, and I remember saying this to him after the election. One of the first times we talked was, I thought he overperformed. There were three powerful incumbents in that race: Vezina, Rita Mercier, and John Drinkwater. Mm-hmm. And for him to get 4,500 votes, whatever that number was. Maybe I'm
I don't
giving him a couple of hundred extra. He wasn't close, but it was a good number of votes. Fourth place was a lot farther away, I think, from fifth place than fourth place was from third place, if I remember that correctly. So for a first-time run, that was a pretty good campaign. So I don't think he had anything to hang his head in shame over. And I do think staying a little quiet was, I think that was probably a smart move. After, kind of reassess and get back at it. That's just my personal observation. I do have him coming in a couple of days to record a podcast, though. So I'll have a little more information from him. But what I'm curious about is, has he changed as a candidate? Is he going to run a different campaign than he did in 2021?
I don't know if he's running any campaign other than Facebook. I mean, I see stuff in emails and stuff like that, but I think what
I've heard him on the radio, and he is coming in here, sitting down for a half-hour session or however long it goes.
He may have been over-reliant on consultants. He had the money, and he tried to run basically a state senate campaign or a very localized U.S. rep race, because I think that even now when I read the stuff that's coming out, it sounds like consultants speak to me. It doesn't sound organic. All right. Now Bobby's educated, and so he's not going to be fucking this or whatever, right? Not that he doesn't drop the F-bomb, but he's not going to be crass, right? Or boorish, like maybe I could be. But his rhetoric, I thought, sounds canned, like it comes out of a shop. And I've worked with the shops. They can be like that. And if you can't take to the door if there's a disconnect between who you are at the door and what your literature says. So if he can get out there and he's running at large, it's tough to do a city race like that. But he can put his face on it and be sincere, then maybe he can capitalize. But I see Cory Belanger as the dark horse in this race. All
right, so let's talk about that. There is one, we call it an open seat. Every seat is open, but I don't think there's anybody in the city who doesn't believe that Vezina and Rita Mercier are capturing two of those three at-large seats. You've got an incumbent, Eric Gitchier, who, love him or hate him, is drawing a lot of the oxygen in the room in that at-large race. You've got a former incumbent, Cory Belanger, trying to get back on. He's got some good name recognition. He's made some connections through the year. And you have Bobby, who ran that impressive race. Virak Oy, as I said, just doesn't seem to be getting any traction, although I see he has the biggest signs around, though. That guy has some giant signs out there.
Is he running to do something or running to be something?
I don't know.
Signs by a lot of name recognition.
What are you hearing out there, Eric Gitchier, Cory Belanger? Normally, before this past year, I'd have lumped the two of them into the same camp. A lot of the same supporters, right? Both were on the Colley Stadium side of the high school battle way back then. Both kind of seemed to have run in the same political crowds, through the years, the good old boys, as you like to call them. Eric, though, has kind of distanced himself a little bit. He's become the anti-establishment candidate in the election, but also the anti-establishment counselor. Fair to judge him as such.
Yes.
Cory Belanger is the establishment candidate. To me, that's a really fascinating role. Can he fill that role to the point where he can get in there in third place?
All right,
lots to unpack there.
I want to punch, right? So first I want to say that I think Rita is a lock, okay? People, my more progressive friends are going to be all up in my face about this. Like, I'm saying she's not the best. She's not the best. I've told Rita, I get along with Rita fine. I've never voted for Rita. I don't think she's the best city councilor. The thing is that she represents, there's a lot of people in Lowell that do, but many of them are moving away to Boca Raton or, that stretch of road along Route 3A with all the stone statues, right? So like there's a lot of this shifting, there's demographic shifts in the city, right? But not enough to Boca. She leaves when she chooses, all right, unless there's a catastrophe. Vesna, he's lost a race before because the newspaper went at him hard, and I think there was a political movement to try to whack him down, all right? And because he's just rubbed people the wrong way. He hasn't played it safe. And this ADU thing, his position is pretty strong. I think that's a young person's game, ADUs, which is John Drinkwater, but I don't think it's a high propensity voter game, and that could come back to bite Vesna. Now, how hard does it bite him? If he's got a cushion of votes, how many could he sort of afford to lose? And what would he pick up for being he's not going to pick up any progressives. Did he not have them already? So I think that gets us back to where you want to be with Cory and Eric. But if you want to,
yeah. So what? How do you look at that race right now? I mean, we talked about it a little bit last month when we recorded a podcast. But how do you see it today? What are you hearing out there on the streets?
So it's somewhat the same, and I know Eric has been. Eric doesn't run up to Hampton Beach during the summertime. He's a homebody. Mm-hmm. All right. He's an athlete, but he's kind of nerdy. So in that sort of reserved kind of stay at home way, right? Like he's not gallivanting anywhere. So he's been spending his summer pecking away at knocking doors. And we've already covered that concept, right?
That's exactly, I'm glad you said that, because that's what he's working.
Yes.
Every candidate says they work. Every candidate thinks they work. Eric, from what I understand, he's out there working.
Cory has stabbed at it. I'm not going to say that he hasn't. But if I was going to guess who's spent more hours logged out on the road, I'm going to say
Cory. You said it's Cory Belanger.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Cory, but I just wanted to make sure
Belanger.
that you were talking about Cory Belanger versus Cory Robinson.
So
Cory Robinson has not been as present knocking doors as he was 2 years ago. He was everywhere.
Me going.
Well, so I don't think he needs to be. And there's still time. He knocks doors on Tuesday nights too. There's something to be said for campaigning on Tuesday nights. Right. That's why incumbency is so powerful. He doesn't have to do now what he did in the summer of 2021.
And Cory is not a stay-at-home guy. Cory's out.
Right, so if he's not knocking your door, you'll see him at every fundraiser, every whatever.
He was just at St. Mike's not too long ago, all right? Like, Cory works the grounds. Whether he's doing door knocking or he's just, working the scene, he is doing that, all right? So, and he has the benefit of incumbency. His name is in pretty much everybody's mouth. And I'd say 70% of the people like the taste. All right. So I'm just.
It's a family program, even though it's the internet.
I totally didn't mean anything weird. All right.
So back to the Belanger.
Yeah. So I think Eric has the edge on the work side of things. All right. But again, you show up at the door, your hat in hand, right? High propensity voters are going to be like, they're going to start measuring him. They're either going to subsidize him based on his allegiances or discounting him based on allegiances. The manager is the story with these two. Who is ready to check the city manager, and who is more in line to sort of facilitate the manager's programming, or his, what he would like to do with inside City Hall. Now, I don't take Corey as a hard rubber stamp, but I think he's going to break towards Tom Golden. But when he does check Tom, I don't think he's going to light his hair on fire. And, whereas Gittier has definitely decided to go into a more performative state in the city council chamber. Now, that's worked out well for some, all right, in the past. And, I get stink eye when I bring out any particular names, Bud Caulfield. So he's more performative. All right.
Eric Gittier's style I thought he was a strong supporter of the city manager early on, but as we've gone on, he's become kind of the Dick Howe Sr., the Tarsi Poulias, the Bud Caulfield, the Rodney Elliott, going after the manager on a regular basis, and the administration.
He has successfully avoided having to be the prince of the 8-1 votes, which is now 10-1. He has stood his ground on a couple of things to make the point. But on big things, I think there's been enough consensus that he hasn't done that. But I've said before, I know people that really like and respect Tom Golden, but they are, myself one of them, but I'm not a resident anymore. Tom is going to have influences on how he conducts himself. If you leave him unchecked, some of the people in parts of his circle, not his entire circle, right? They're going to try to get things from Tom. And so I think if there's no pressure to not do that, he might be inclined to do that. All right. Comes from a legacy of the way things have been. All right. It would be like slipping on the old jeans. Why wouldn't he do that? It's comfortable and just, but we've got a different city. And I think Tom has what it takes to step up and be the manager that the city needs right now. Some people will never believe that, and some people will only believe that. We need a council that keeps them on track. And, you're going to have a style thing. Do you want somebody that's more animated and kind of, hair on fire kind of guy? Or do you want a guy that's more talking to him in the privacy of a side meeting and sort of kind of leaving it alone on the council floor?
So up to this point, the ADUs have dominated. The homeless issue dominated the discussions. ADUs kind of took over late spring, summer with the meetings, and we'll eventually have the vote on that, I think, before the election. How will that affect it? It will be an important issue, and there are some who I think have taken will never vote for anybody who supports ADUs. I would imagine you have some of the opposite. I really can't get my finger on the pulse of where, if you were to make that a referendum, where it would end. But in terms of the candidates, again, I think Vesna Noon and Rita Mercy are safe. They're on opposite ends of that. Eric Gittier and Corey Belanger strike me as being on the same end of that. Corey not as vociferously, but from our podcast here, he didn't like the ordinance as it was drawn up. I don't know how he likes it with the changes that have been worked in. Bobby Tubielli, I think, is a 100% proponent of them, and I'm not sure where Viragoy is on them. Do you think ADUs will be a defining issue?
No. I think for some, right? So like the high school affected way more Lowellians, right? How many people are going to be affected by ADUs? Not that many.
Well, if you listen to the opponents of it, the whole city is going to turn into one giant ADU.
Yeah, I understand. I don't listen to them. Look, when we're advocating, what's that thing the lawyers say? Like, if you can argue the law, argue the law. If you can't argue the law, pound it.
On the table.
Pound the table, right? I think we got a lot of table pounding out there. But I think this, to me, again, like, I think people like Kim Scott and Corey Robinson, they get the benefit of trying to negotiate an outcome. All right. I think there's the always ADU crowd, there's the never ADU crowd, and then there's the people that are trying to find some, and then, we've got this sunset, basically, right? The reauthorization or whatever they want to call it, right? Yeah. So the people that are working at it to solve it in the middle, I think those people, I think they look the best in this whole thing. But will the voters recognize that? Not on the level of the high school, not anywhere near the level of the high school.
All right, so fascinating point you brought up, because I was wondering it and then I completely forgot about it. But everybody sees that as a 7-4 vote, except Kim Scott and Corey Robinson got certain concessions that they had asked for. And I'm not sure they can just vote no now, because a lot of their thing was, I could support them, but if it's fixed, some of it has been fixed, not all of it. I'm going to be very curious to see if they have become yes votes, which then makes it 9-2. And how does that play in the race that we're all watching, Kim Scott, Susie Chun? I think Susie's in favor of it. Again, I'd love to hear her say that herself, but just by looking at her supporters, I think she's in favor of it. Kim hasn't been, so she would draw from that well, but what if she switches? Does she alienate those who supported her ahead of time? Does she get points, as you said, for fighting to make it a better ordinance? I always wonder what's in the mind of people. Jilted lovers act strangely. If you're a jilted ADU opponent and Kim Scott, suddenly says I'm a yes vote because they made all these changes, how do you react? Do you vote for the 100%? ADU vote?
The mind of the voter is something that I don't know much about. Like how to message to the voter to try to give them ideas to consider. That's something more like, but what they think. I mean, I really never saw Trump coming. So how much do I know about it? And sort of to represent Kim a little bit, I would say for me, I think I'm more impressed by the voice of reason aspect of Kim at this moment, right? Whether she ultimately votes for or against, I don't know how many people take a hard, move their hand on the checkbox because of a yay or a nay. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think more people will be more focused on the discretion and the leadership, right? Even sort of soft-handed, because she's not a pound the desk person, right? I think she's firm, but I don't think she's a showboater. So I think most people, reasonable people, would be persuaded by that part of it. And then the people that are going to go like, oh, you lost my vote or you gained my vote. There'll be the activists will threaten candidates. They'll threaten the people on the ballot. But, when it's all said and done, I think reason wins most of the time.
All right. And we're going to wrap this up because we'll let it serve as our transition into our pod squad, which we'll delve a lot more into this with Jack and Batch and Michaela. But I believe over these next month and a half of the campaign, whatever's left, that migrant issue at the Inn and Conference Center is going to become the dominant issue in the selection. I think the sides are already preparing to frame it. You're a hater, you're a protectionist, I can just kind of see it playing out. Do you believe that the ICC issue and how we welcome the migrants, do we couch our words, do we pound the table or whatever? I think that's gonna make up a lot of minds here in the last month that I don't think we foresee yet.
It's I think it could, because I want to say the word taxes and then just write that down if we can come back to it, because it plays into national politics, the idea of, America first and close the border, or we're an open nation, our economics require that we bring in low wage workers, right? You and I have had these discussions, right? So the ICC is going to play into sort of existing national politics. And in a way, if I'm kind of, if I'm rubbing Susie Choon's nose into it about Cambodian national politics, I've got to say this ICC thing is going to kind of, I think, play into sort of the worst of American national politics. All right. We're going to go outside in a way the ADU thing has, because it's, for whatever reason, I think ADUs was something that was a nonpartisan thing, but the progressives decided to make it a progressive issue. The ICC and the idea of taking something sort of off the economic development map and bringing in a variety of refugees for some period of time, that's going to strike people in sort of their deep-seated passions about what we are as a nation and what we are as a city.
I think, from my end, I think the fact that the governor has bungled this, and I'll explain more in the future, that I think she's doing the only thing she can do if she's not willing to tell the president of the United States, we can't take anymore, we can't handle them anymore. But that aside, if you're going to receive them, communication is key. And right now, there's no indication that there's any communication. Nobody knows what's happening. The schools don't know. The counselors don't know. The city manager doesn't know, if you believe any of them. You're hearing horror stories from other communities where kids are showing up in school now. Some of the migrants have already been placed, and they're showing up in schools, and the schools didn't know that they were coming. If that happens here in Lowell, then I think that's why I think this issue is going to explode, because I don't think the governor has handled it properly. I'm not sure she can handle it properly for a lot of the national political things that you kind of highlighted there.
There's logistics. All right, so like have very limited experience with refugee resettlement, right? But I remember when the folks from Myanmar came in, and I think there was some stuff with Jean Franco, and she created a whole program about language isolated kids and some sort of an assimilation, and then bring, not to sound like prison, but like how to translate it into general population, right? I've heard from the folks kind of in and around the International Institute, which does that often the State Department isn't transparent. They don't have certain types of information. Sometimes it's better. You ever hear that phrase, it's easier to turn a no into a yes than a yes into a no? Kind of like if you set people's expectations by trying to speculate, a lot of times people don't keep an open mind. They start grinding on the speculation and they move forward, right? And then when it doesn't happen, people get upset. So maybe even though it's a huge hassle for the governor, you just don't say anything and stonewall people. I don't know if that's the best thing, but she definitely can't afford to go into 2026 without a strong footing in Lowell. And one of the things that I think she's dealing with right now is her progressive Democratic base have a split personality on this thing. There are some folks that are much more like, let's build the hotel homeless. Right? That's kind of harsh, but whatever. Let's build the hotel homeless. Or warehouse the working poor. I think that was something you might have seen in a text, right? Or let's preserve, like we're at a fragile point for economic redevelopment. And we've been talking about experiencing Lowell. What does it mean to just pull the ICC out from under the rug, right? Now, I've seen some different things. There was a discussion actually on InsideLowell, other than that disgusting thread that really bummed me out. There was a little segment in there that was a dialogue between Scott Plath and Ray Weicker, actually, talking about what the potentials were for using the ICC in a program for UMass Lowell. But then I think Scott rightfully pointed out that Amherst has that programming,
Correct.
and so Lowell probably wouldn't dig in. But
Middlesex has a hospitality
Middlesex
program,
does,
and they're right next door.
and they're right. They're right across the canal,
Yes.
right? And so I think there's some players. There's different stuff that is it's percolating. The bubble has its secrets, but back to Healy and sort of the Dem side of things. I think there's different people with different perspectives on this, and she's going to have to figure out how to, not make everybody happy, but maybe not piss everybody off. Now, the state GOP is going to just exaggerate anything that she has done as some sort of a fumble and bad leadership, and they're just going to blow it all up as one big shit stew, right? It's not going to be that. We're Lowell. Lowell is a city that welcomes people. It's a question of whether or not we have the resources and whether we burden share with the state and the federal government, or we burden shift down to an unfunded mandate on the municipality.
I'm going to bet on the latter. More on that if you watch a future podcast here on Inside Lowell, or I should say another podcast that is posted, the Pod Squad, our most recent Pod Squad. We'll get a lot more into that. But election 2023, now less than 2 months away, Tuesday, November 7th. Make sure you get on out there and vote. Register to vote first, folks. And then if you're informed, get on out and vote. If you're not, stay home. I'm not going to try to convince you to go vote if you don't know what you're voting for. I've changed my tag on that. But anyway, Jack Mitchell, you're part of our election night team. I think we'll have our friend Asa Stutz with us. Jake Vitale will be part of our coverage, and just confirmed today, Mona Tyree.
All right.
Will be part of our election night coverage.
Nice.
Here on Inside Lowell. So we're gonna bring her into one of these sessions, by the way, sooner to kind of get her feet wet in front of the camera.
Get the flow.
Yeah,
right?
we'll have a few sparring sessions with us, and then she'll be ready to go. But I was excited to have her join us as well. So thank you, as always, for doing this podcast with me. Thank all of you for tuning in as well. InsideLowell.com. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, stay safe, everybody.